At 5:47, the house taught its lesson again. The hallway plank gave its single tired creak, the one I could feel in my teeth, and the air settled through the vents in a long, dry breath. I lay still, counting. 20 minutes before the alarm, 30 more before he expected shoes on the floor. The cracks in my ceiling made a river map I had memorized. My eyes traced each tributary while my hands finished the morning before it started. Bed corners bit sharp as cut paper, yesterday's jeans, new flannel, laces tucked, shirts aligned edge to edge. Everything squared because everything had to be squared. Order was the only language that kept the house from raising its voice. The handle clicked with a sound I had taught myself not to flinch at. Wyatt filled the doorway like a locked gate, gray eyes scanning the room the way a magnet tests iron. Dark denim, pressed shirt, key ring flat against his sternum. He didn't say good morning. He said what he always said. Morning inspection. I stood with my hands clasped behind me, the posture he put into me when I was 8, and impressionable enough to confuse stillness with safety. He passed the windowsill with one finger. Mattress corner lifted, drawer spacing judged. Acceptable, he said, the word flat as a stamped coin. Another day avoided. He started to turn, then paused. Your sister's next. Make sure she's ready. The soft click of the door sounded larger than a slam. I waited until his weight moved down the hall, then tapped the thin wall between our rooms twice. Our signal. Karen's door was ajar. She was on the edge of her bed in an oversized pajama shirt, hair pale and tangled, eyes too old for 14. She stared into her open hands like they might produce an answer if she watched long enough. He's coming, I whispered. She nodded. I pulled a sweater and jeans from her dresser. September was warm, but the sweater was non-negotiable. When she raised her arms, the pajama sleeves climbed and the bruises showed. Fingerprints in purple and yellow where a body had no right to keep records. Karen. She tugged the sleeves down fast. It's nothing. That isn't nothing. It doesn't matter. It did. But there were days when naming pain only fed it. We put her room in order together, the way prisoners fold time, sheets smoothed, books stacked, the small wooden box of found things, rock, feather, the kind of treasure only a child knows how to keep alive, hidden deeper in the drawer where he wouldn't think to look. Boot steps. I squeezed her shoulder. Wyatt repeated the ritual with the efficiency of a man testing bolts on a bridge. Karen kept her eyes on the floor, jaw locked. Hair, he said. She smoothed it back with trembling fingers. Better. To me. Kitchen. 10 minutes. The kitchen was a mess hall without laughter. 3 plates, 3 glasses, 3 sets of silverware set at precise distances as if measured by a steel rule, oatmeal and toast. He cut the slices into exact squares and chewed in a metronome that had no song in it. Rules, he said, though we could recite them in our sleep. No leaving the property without permission, Karen whispered. No visitors. No phone calls, I added. Chores completed by their times. Meals silent unless addressed. The cellar, Wyatt said, eyes like cold hardware, remains off limits, completely, permanently. He didn't have to glance at the heavy wooden door, iron hinge thick as a wrist, lock older than our memories. The key hung on his chain. He wanted us to notice. We had learned not to, but sometimes the eyes are stubborn. Karen's gaze lingered a heartbeat too long. He saw. His hand shot out, found her wrist, closed exactly where the old marks bloomed new. She gasped, not loud enough to qualify as disobedience. What are you looking at? Nothing. Don't lie to me, he squeezed. The color ran out of her face. Let go of her, I said, standing. Sit down, he said, voice like a lid slowly sealing. You're hurting her. I'm teaching her. He leaned until the key ring flashed. The cellar is forbidden for a reason, not because I am cruel, because I am protecting you from truths that would split your minds. The words slid into the room with the steam off the oatmeal. He released her. Clean the kitchen. I'm in the barn until noon. The back door closed. The air remembered how to move. Karen cradled her wrist while she tried not to cry. Let me see, I said, and she let me. The finger marks looked like dark fruit crushed in a hurry. I didn't mean to look, she whispered. I just wonder sometimes. What's down there? It doesn't matter, I said, wrapping ice in a towel. What matters is staying alive until we can leave. When? Soon. A lie can be a bridge if you need to cross a river with no name. We worked the day in the low hum of survival. He fixed the stubborn things in the barn. We weeded, cleaned, stitched the house back into the shape he recognized. At dinner, he cut meat into squares again and announced something that did not fit the shape. I'm leaving in the morning. Business in the city. Several days. In 17 years, he had never trusted absence. Several days? I asked. 3, 4, maybe longer. He spoke the rules again as if distance required reinforcement. The cellar, he added, hand on the keys, and the word pulled the light out of the room. I'll know if you touch it. Consequences will be permanent. That night his truck idled in the driveway like an animal deciding whether to run. He adjusted mirrors, looked up, found my eyes in the window. Then the red taillights stitched themselves down the road and the dark closed over him like water. Silence changed shape. It wasn't the careful quiet we kept to avoid attention. It was the kind that lets the lungs expand all the way. We stood at the window and breathed like we were learning how. The first day we kept the form without its maker. Oatmeal at the table because sitting anywhere else felt like a crime without a law. Chores in the order he preferred because changing order felt like inviting him back. By afternoon, Karen dropped a sock and didn't freeze. She bent, caught it, and the corner of her mouth moved up as if the string inside her loosened a fraction. On the second day, the house admitted the old rooms existed. We crossed the formal dining room he never used, the parlor with its heavy curtains. The mantel wore a thin dust that marked it as artifact, not furniture. Karen sat in our mother's faded blue chair and said it still smelled faintly floral. It did, or I wanted it to. She's not coming back, Karen said, and the truth had no malice in it, just temperature. But maybe we didn't finish the thought. The cellar door listened. Doors can do that when you give them a job for too many years. By sunset, the door was a clock we could feel without looking. It tugged the eyes when we passed. I put my ear to the wood and heard only my breath answering itself. That should have been enough. The third night at 2:37, the house breathed wrong. I woke to the kind of quiet that feels posed, as if a room has decided not to move. Then I heard it. Soft, deliberate scratching under the floor. Not mice. A pattern. 3 scratches. A pause. 3 scratches again. I sat up. The sound moved under me like a person pacing in a room below a room. Then another sound unwound from the dark and laid itself on the floorboards, thinner than a thread but human. Someone was crying beneath the house. A soft knock at my door. "Justin," came Karen's whisper, shaped by the wood. I opened. Her hair was sleep messy, but her eyes were clear and terrified. "Do you hear it?" We sat on my bed and listened to the old house talk in a voice we didn't know it had. The crying turned to whispers too thin for meaning, but heavy with intention. Then another answering. A conversation you can't translate, only feel. "Who is that?" Karen breathed. I didn't know, but the sound lived under the kitchen, where the forbidden door found its hinge to the world. We told ourselves stories about pipes and wind. The house shook its head. By the 4th morning, I found Karen at the cellar door, palms wide on the wood, ear pressed hard. She didn't look up when I said her name. "She's down there, Justin." "Who?" "Mom." My throat tightened so fast I had to swallow twice. She left. He read the note. "You remember? Did you read it?" she asked, and her voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. "With your own eyes." I remembered the paper in his hand, the way fire swallowed it before ink could touch us. "He read it," I said. "We heard him." "He burned it," she said, before we could see. What if he was reading a different letter entirely? I wanted to pull her away. I wanted to unhear the nights. Karen moved aside and I took her place with my ear on the wood. At first my blood made the only sound, then a faint scrape like cloth on stone. Maybe a word shaped itself under that, thin as breath. "Please." We planned action the way the fearful do, by inventory, bolt cutters in the shed, a flashlight with batteries that still had weight. Replace the lock later to hide the sin. Risk measured against risk. being wrong and punished, or being right and too late. At midnight, the pattern came back. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 again. In the kitchen, the sound of movement below was clearer, like someone aligning their breath with ours. We cut the lock. The jaws of the bolt cutters sighed, and the iron gave with a stubborn, ringing consent. The door opened on wooden steps that went down into a smell older than the house. Wet stone, old metal, something sweet gone sour that clung to the tongue. Mom, Karen called, voice small and bright at the same time. It's us. A sound came up that made my bones feel like they were made for carrying more than weight. My babies, the voice said, wrecked with relief. My babies. It was our mother's voice, thinner and cracked, but ours. Karen stepped forward and the dark opened its hand. The first step took my weight with a long, tired groan. The second held like a secret. The flashlight beam jittered because my hand wouldn't agree to be still. Stone walls appeared where I expected poured concrete, stones fitted without mortar, damp with a skin of green that felt wrong under my knuckles when I brushed it. Older than our house, older than the road that learned our name. The stairs shouldn't have gone that far. They did. 20 steps. More. My breath picked up the rhythm of the earlier knocks and wouldn't reset. The air cooled and thickened until each inhale tasted like a cellar where apples have forgotten their names and iron has taught water how to remember. The beam caught floor at last, stone polished by years of use. The space opened. The cellar wasn't a room. It was a kept secret. Machines waited in the dark. Brass ribs, iron spines, wheels and gauges with thin red needles, resting on numbers that meant nothing to anyone living upstairs. Cables rested like sleeping hoses between metal tables crowded with tools. Shelves climbed the far walls with leather-bound books and glass jars whose contents didn't want the light. In the center, a machine taller than me hummed a note I could feel through the soles of my feet. The hum went into my ribs and changed my heart's idea of tempo. It was the sound big rooms make when they've been patient for too long. Karen stood in front of it, not touching, as still as if stillness were the only right answer to a question. Karen, I said, and she didn't move. I rounded the machine and saw what pinned her. At its base, a shape first reads as cloth. Then the mind catches up to the facts the nose already knows. Bones kept where a person should be. Skin pulled into parchment. Hair matted and long enough to carry memory. Fingertips ruined into white. The stone around the body was scored with grooves. Some shallow, some deep enough to seat a coin. Scratch marks packed so tightly they made their own texture. Up as far as a standing person could reach. Down along the floor where knees had to have lived for hours and days. Nails torn, then the fingers themselves worn to bone. She tried to go through stone, Karen said, voice flat with the shock that preserves truth. She never stopped. I lifted the beam. The dress was a blue I recognized even in its ruin. The skull's angles were a map I knew without wanting to. I didn't want language for it. Language arrived anyway. Mom? Karen didn't look at me. Wyatt kept her down here. He told us she left, and she never even got a chance to step out the door. The machine hummed a little harder, or my blood got louder. The air pressed. Somewhere far above us, a truck approached up a road I didn't realize my ear was monitoring. The engine shut off. The silence that followed came down the stairs like weight. His boots crossed our kitchen. Every step landed as if the house were a drum. Justin, Karen, his voice carried differently here, larger, stripped of the patience he wore like a uniform. He knows, Karen whispered. I looked for places that weren't there. Shelves became edges and didn't offer shelter. The stairs were the only exit. They gave themselves to the sound of his descent. I counted because counting was the last tool left to me. 1, 2, 3, 4. The beam trembled across the wall. 5, 6, 7. Boots, then legs, then the whole man assembled himself into the room, pipe in his hand heavy enough to convert argument to emergency. The control he wore every morning had bled out of his face. Only the plan remained. You broke my one rule, he said. 3 years I kept you perfect. 3 years of preparation, and you put your mouths to the wrong door. What did you do to her, I asked, and the words ripped their own way out. He glanced at the body as if it were an old coat on a chair. Nothing changed on his face. Florence was weak, he said. She couldn't understand order. I gave her a place in it. She would not accept the gift. You killed her. I tried to save her, like I'm trying to save you. Some people need correction at the root. He lifted the pipe and Karen flinched and I stepped to cover her. The machine warmed my back. The vibration crawled up my spine. You two will be easier, he said. The machine will help. What machine, I said, though my shoulder already knew its heat, my life's work. 20 years to cure disobedience, to take the friction out of children. Imagine a home without the grit of refusal. He moved closer and the pipe rose and I slid along the machine until iron kissed my shoulder blade. It won't hurt for long, he said. Adjustment is a matter of days. After that, there's peace you can't even picture. He swung, and I threw myself right, and the pipe took stone from the wall and sparked, and he roared, "Stop running," and raised it again. I pushed Karen behind the machine, tried to keep him on my side of it. The pipe clanged off brass and steam spit into the air, and he snapped careful, and that was the first true thing he'd said all night. He needed this thing more than he needed us. I hit him with my shoulder as he drew back. We went down hard, the pipe clattering away into the dark. His hands found my throat because they knew the way. Pressure built with a mechanic's patience. My vision narrowed at the edges like a lens choosing its subject. My fingers searched stone, hunting anything with weight. They closed on a shard. I put it where it mattered. The thud when it met his skull sounded like fruit dropped from a height. His grip slipped and air came back dirty and beautiful. He found the pipe. I found a wrench, and the difference between us was that he was worried about the machine and I wasn't. When he looked at the dented fitting with fear, I put the wrench into his temple as if it could be an answer. His knees went away. The pipe left his hand. He hit stone and stayed. Is he dead? Karen asked, voice small but steady now. I found his pulse. Weak, still there. No, I said, not yet. We leave, I said, because the room hadn't stopped humming, and the books watched us in a way that didn't feel like paper. We took the stairs 2 at a time, and the kitchen light felt wrong on my skin. Coats. Door. Air. The cold of outside wiped the smell of metal from the roof of my mouth. We ran the driveway like it was a throat we had to get through. The road took us because roads do that if you insist enough. At the first lit house in the village, a woman opened and ushered us into warmth and carpet and human sound. She wrapped blankets around our shock and made tea that smelled like safety, and her husband called the police with hands that shook for us. I told the officers everything, and I watched the shape of their faces shift, sympathy solidifying into procedure. We returned with them before dawn, cars shouldering the yard with red and blue and duty. I led them to the cellar door with the certainty that got me through fights I had no business winning. Downstairs, the machine was gone. The stone was gone. The chamber had shrunk to an ordinary room with white concrete walls and a gray floor, and nothing to hold a fear. No shelves, no jars, no body. The stairs we'd come down were newer, painted to match, as if the house had decided to remember itself differently overnight. Where's the machine? I said to a room that couldn't answer. Where's my mother? The officers gave each other the look professionals use when a story takes this turn. We climbed back up. The broken lock wasn't on the kitchen floor because the floor didn't remember it. The bolt cutters had put themselves back on their hook, obedient as the life he wanted for us. Karen sat at the table and stared at her hands, and when I asked her to tell them about the sounds, she shook her head like water and said she didn't remember that part. She remembered running. She remembered me fighting our father. Wyatt arrived in cuffs. He played concern the way a man wears a suit he has had tailored, and when they told him about a chamber, he said, evenly, "This house has no basement beyond a small storage pad," and they nodded because the room downstairs agreed with him. This he spoke about discipline and isolation, and my imagination like he had practiced today's lines years ago. He told them our mother lived in Portland with her sister and sent birthday cards. He knew the street, the aunt's name. He offered a desk drawer no one had opened yet. The officers wrote calmly. My world tipped like a picture frame that refuses to hang straight. The cellar door stood open, quietly ordinary, as if it had never held back anything but cool air and seasonal potatoes. Even stripped bare, the truth stayed in me, the way certain smells anchor a life. The grooves under my fingernails itched where I had touched the scratched stone. The hum of the machine sat in my bones like a second pulse. The word my mother spoke rose and fell in my ear, the one gentle thing the dark had ever handed me. We were taken to safety. The house kept its secret. I promised myself a thing I could live on. When I am older, when I have tools he didn't teach me to fear, I will find the chamber that pretends not to exist. I will bring the names back to the walls. I will give my mother a place that doesn't change overnight to protect a liar. For now, we were breathing. For now, my sister's hand was still in mine. For now would have to be enough. For a while, I convinced myself silence was healing, that the absence of that mechanical hum meant we were free. But silence can rot too. It just takes longer for the smell to reach you. The state took us in, fed us, gave us a place to sleep that wasn't built from fear. Karen's room had curtains with sunlight in them. Mine had a desk with drawers that opened without sticking. We were supposed to sleep easy, eat well, go to school, but I couldn't sleep, not deeply. Each night my body braced for the creak of that one hallway board, the one that used to announce Wyatt's inspection. My dreams were full of machines, clicking gears, turning screws, soft whirs that synced with my heartbeat. Sometimes I'd wake up sweating, my fingers curled around an invisible wrench. They said trauma plays tricks, that my mind was rewriting things it didn't understand. But trauma doesn't leave green dust under your fingernails. 2 weeks after the police closed the case, I woke up to that smell again, wet stone and something faintly sweet, like fruit rotting behind metal. I followed it to the vent above my bed. A low vibration came through, the kind that isn't sound so much as pressure, like standing near a transformer. It was faint but steady. Hum, pause, hum, the rhythm of the machine. The next morning, I checked with Karen. She hadn't noticed anything. Her eyes were brighter these days, her voice a little lighter. When I mentioned the noise, she just stared at me for a long time and said, "You should stop listening for ghosts." Maybe she was right. But that night, the hum came again, clearer this time, and just under it, like a whisper drawn across glass, Justin. I sat up fast enough that my blanket tangled around my legs. The sound stopped. My pulse filled the room. I waited a full minute before whispering back, "Mom?" The vent answered with a hiss, like a sigh. The next morning, there was green dust on the floor under the vent. I didn't tell Karen. She was starting to laugh again. I didn't want to steal that from her. But the next day at breakfast, her spoon froze halfway to her mouth. Do you hear that?" she asked. I didn't have to ask what she meant. The hum had found her too. It didn't stop after that. It followed us, low, constant, like a second heartbeat hiding behind our own. Sometimes it came from the walls, sometimes from the pipes. Once, when the refrigerator kicked on, it harmonized perfectly with the motor until I couldn't tell which one had started it. The social worker said maybe we were triggering each other's anxiety. I wanted to believe that. I really did, but anxiety doesn't crawl. The night before we were supposed to move to a foster family in the next county, I woke to see a faint light spilling under my door. Not yellow like a hallway bulb, not blue like moonlight, green, soft and pulsing, the same shade as the moss that used to cling to those cellar walls. Karen was standing in the hall, barefoot, her hair hanging wild around her shoulders. Her eyes were wide but empty, like she was looking through me. "She's calling," she said. I didn't ask who. I knew. I followed her outside. The air was still, heavy with summer. Across the yard, the grass bent in a slow circle, like something spinning beneath it. Karen stepped toward it. "Karen, stop!" She didn't. When I caught her arm, her skin was cold, damp like stone. I shook her, hard. Her lips moved, and the voice that came out wasn't hers. It's not gone, she said. It's underneath everything. It's building again. Then she screamed, one sharp, tearing sound, and collapsed. The ground where she'd been standing was wet, not with dew. The grass had turned slick and dark, like it had been soaked in oil. I dragged her back to the porch, shaking. Her eyes fluttered open, and she whispered, "Did we ever really leave?" That was the last night we stayed there. The next morning, when I went back to that spot, the circle of grass was perfectly dry. No oil, no green light, just earth that looked recently disturbed. The social worker said we needed therapy. That trauma can echo, I nodded. I didn't tell her that echoes can dig. Days passed, the hum faded again until I could almost believe I'd imagined it. Then, one night while lying awake, I heard it again, not through the walls this time, but faintly from outside. I opened my window and listened. It came from the woods, from the direction of the house we'd left behind. I shouldn't have gone, but some sounds don't let you stay still. I took the back road on my bike. The night was thick, the kind that eats headlights. When I reached the property line, the air shifted. Colder, denser, like the house was still holding its breath. The building stood exactly as we'd left it. Windows dark, porch sagging, the front door locked, but the cellar door was open. It shouldn't have been there at all. The police had sealed it. And yet there it was, yawning into black. I stepped closer. The smell hit me again, stronger than ever. Sweet, metallic, like blood stirred into old fruit. I held my breath and listened. The hum was louder now, and underneath it, a faint voice repeating, "Please, please, please, Mom, I should have run." Instead, I went down. The first steps creaked exactly the same way they had before. Only this time, when my foot hit the bottom, there were no machines, no stone, just dirt. But the hum was still there, vibrating through the soil. I knelt and pressed my hand to the ground. It was warm. The rhythm matched my heartbeat. No, it was my heartbeat, echoed back, faster each time. Then the earth pulsed, just once, hard enough to knock me backward. The air filled with that green light again, pouring through the cracks in the floor like fog. From somewhere below, a voice rose. Not a whisper this time, but a full, trembling call. He built it under everything. And then, clear and close, run. I ran. I didn't look back. When I reached the road, the hum followed me, low, steady, not from the house anymore, but from beneath the asphalt, running with me like an underground current. I rode home until my legs gave out. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I woke, there was mud under my nails again. And this morning, the vent hums louder. It's not in my head anymore. It's in the walls of every place we go. The machine isn't gone. It just learned to spread. And when I close my eyes, I swear I can still hear my mother's voice, soft, patient, mechanical now, saying, "Adjustment takes time." I thought the humming would stop if I ignored it, if I filled the silence with noise of my own. So I bought a cheap fan from a thrift store, one that rattled enough to drown out a heartbeat. I played static from an old radio all night long. I even started sleeping with headphones in, looping sounds of rainfall that never came. But the hum adapted. It learned the rhythm of every sound I made and slipped between them like a parasite. Sometimes it pulsed in sync with my breath, other times in time with the refrigerator's cycle. Once, when the pipes clanked, it responded, like something alive was listening back. It wasn't long before the dreams came again. They started soft, flashes of the cellar, glints of green light, my mother's hands moving over gears slick with moss. But then, night by night, they stretched longer until I could feel the dampness of that underground air again, the soft drag of soil against my ankles as if something below was breathing in rhythm with me. In one dream, I stood in the middle of a forest. The trees were still, too symmetrical, their bark slick and dark as iron. Beneath my feet, the ground moved, rising and falling with shallow breaths. When I knelt, I realized the roots weren't roots at all. They were cables, slick with wet soil, pulsing faintly with green light. And from somewhere below came the whisper, "Feed it." I woke with my fingernails packed with dirt. The next day, Karen wouldn't get out of bed. She said she could hear it through the mattress now. The same hum, steady and low, like something was tunneling below her room. I tried to tell her it wasn't real, but her eyes, they looked like Mom's had near the end, hollow but alert, like she was seeing more than I could. That night, I couldn't sleep. The fan had stopped working, and the air felt heavy, as if it were thick with unseen motion. At around 3 a.m., I heard Karen's door creak open, bare feet on wood. Then, the front door clicking softly shut. I followed her outside. The moon was thin, barely a sliver, but I could still make out her silhouette moving across the yard. Slow, deliberate. She was heading toward the tree line. I called her name once. She didn't answer. When I caught up, she was kneeling in the grass, her hands sunk deep into the soil. The ground there wasn't grass anymore. It was bare, slick, and dark. She turned to me, her face lit faintly from below by a green glow. "It's hungry," she whispered. "If we feed it, it won't take us." "Feed it what?" Her mouth twitched like she was about to smile. "What it made us of." She lifted her hands. They were covered in mud, but it wasn't just dirt. There were small fragments in it, bits of metal, wiring, even something that looked like teeth fused to rust. I dragged her away. She fought me the whole way back, whispering the whole time, underneath, underneath, underneath. I locked the door behind us, but the ground outside didn't stop moving. I could feel it. Tiny vibrations running through the floorboards, like a buried heart restarting after years of sleep. At dawn, the humming stopped again. The yard was still. Karen slept beside me on the couch, her breathing slow and uneven. When I looked out the window, the bare patch of ground was gone, grass grown back perfectly, too perfectly. But something else caught my eye. Across the street, near the drainage ditch, a man was standing in the mist. He was tall, wearing a ranger's uniform, hat low, boots sinking slightly into the mud. He stared at our house for a long moment before turning and walking into the woods. There were no parks within 30 miles. That afternoon, I asked the social worker about local maintenance crews. She said there weren't any that matched that description. When I pressed, she just smiled a little too tightly and said, "Sometimes people wander. It's not always a story." That night, the hum returned again, but this time it came from beneath the house, deep and resonant, so strong the glasses in the cabinet began to shake. I got out of bed and opened the window. The streetlight outside flickered in rhythm with it, and then, like a power surge, the hum stopped. The air grew still. A smell filled the room, wet metal, decay, and something faintly floral, like old blood. I turned back toward Karen's bed. She was gone. The front door was open again. I ran outside barefoot, the cold biting through the dew. The field shimmered faintly with that impossible green light. Karen stood in the middle of it, eyes wide open, arms spread slightly as if she were waiting for something to embrace her. The ground rippled beneath her like a slow wave. "Karen?" She didn't move, but the hum grew louder, rising in pitch until it wasn't a sound anymore, but a pressure, vibrating in my ribs, shaking my teeth. The grass bent outward from where she stood like it was being pulled toward her. I ran forward, grabbed her arm, cold again, impossibly cold, and yanked her back just as the soil beneath her feet split open. For a second I saw it. Something black and glistening, like machinery wrapped in veins, turning slow as breath. It wasn't metal, not entirely. It flexed, organic, with wet seams that pulsed green. Then the ground sealed itself again. Karen collapsed, gasping. Her hands were shaking, her mouth bleeding from where she'd bitten through her lip. "It's awake," she whispered. "Mom finished it." I looked back at the patch of ground, but it was still again, just another piece of earth pretending to sleep. We didn't sleep after that. By dawn, the hum had faded again, leaving only silence. But silence wasn't comfort anymore. Silence was the sound of something listening, and as the sun came up, I saw it, through the window, beyond the trees, an old wooden sign leaning against a post. It hadn't been there yesterday. Faded letters, just barely visible through the moss. Property of Wyatt Research. The machine wasn't buried under our house. It was everywhere. And I know, it's growing. After that morning, nothing sounded right anymore. Even the birds were off. Each chirp too rhythmic, too mechanical, like something trying to mimic life without quite understanding it. When I walked outside, the ground felt soft under my feet, not muddy, but alive, breathing shallowly. Karen barely spoke. She'd sit at the kitchen table for hours, staring at her reflection in the glass window. When I tried to talk, she'd just whisper, "Do you remember how Mom's hands used to shake?" Then she'd look down at her own and add, "It stopped for her too." By the third day, she stopped eating. By the fifth, she stopped sleeping. I'd wake up to find her standing in the living room, eyes closed, head tilted toward the floor like she was listening. "It's learning our names again," she'd say. The nights stretched out longer. I kept the lights on, but the shadows still moved. They'd stretch across the walls in slow, unnatural waves whenever the hum began. Soft, steady, pulsing in patterns too deliberate to be random. I started to count the intervals, hoping there was some pattern I could break. There was. Every 73 seconds, it paused for exactly 3, then resumed. 73 on, 3 off, like a heart that had found its new rhythm. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but what could I say? The earth beneath my foster house is alive. My mother's invention is tunneling through the soil. No one would believe that. Hell, I barely did, until the floor split open. It happened on the 7th night. Karen was sitting on the couch, motionless as ever. I was in the kitchen when the sound came, a low crack followed by a wet hiss. I turned just in time to see a line tear through the floorboards, long and deliberate, like a scar opening in wood. Green light seeped through the gap, illuminating the room in that sickly glow I thought I'd left behind. The hum rose in pitch, vibrating so hard the dishes fell from the cabinets and shattered. Karen stood up slowly, her face calm, eyes wide and glassy. "It's finished," she whispered. The crack widened. Something began to push upward from beneath, slowly, heavily. I grabbed her arm, but she didn't even flinch. Her gaze was locked on the light. And then it came through. Not a machine, not entirely. It looked like veins made of wire, coiling together into a column that pulsed like muscle. Pieces of rusted metal and dirt clung to it, and between them I could see what looked like skin. Pale, stretched thin, webbed with roots. It was breathing. I stumbled backward, dragging Karen with me, but her feet were planted to the ground. The thing reached higher, nearly touching the ceiling now, humming so deep it made my vision blur. The air smelled like wet copper and mold. Then, from inside the column, I saw it, an eye. Not human, but not mechanical either. Something hybrid, aware. It opened, and for a moment, I saw her, my mother. Her reflection swam in that pulsing green, distorted but unmistakable. She looked young again, unscarred, hands moving over invisible gears. Her lips formed words I couldn't hear until the hum stopped completely and her voice came through, clear and steady. "Don't run. It's too late to be above it." The light flared once more and then snapped out, leaving darkness and the smell of ozone. When I opened my eyes again, the column was gone. Only the cracked boards remained, damp and faintly warm. Karen had collapsed. I carried her upstairs, her skin cold and clammy. She was breathing but faintly, whispering in her sleep. When I leaned closer, I realized she was repeating numbers, over and over, soft and rhythmic. 73, 3, 73, 3, the same pattern, the machine's breath. That night, I sat awake in the corner of the room with every light on. The hum had stopped again, but silence had weight now, like something holding its breath just beneath the floor. I stared at the vent, the walls, the space between the boards, waiting. Around 2 a.m., the smell came back. Wet metal, moss, and dust. I pressed my ear to the wall, and that's when I realized the sound wasn't in the house anymore. It was below the street. A low vibration moving through the pavement, down the length of the road under the other houses. Whatever it wasn't just spreading anymore. It was networking. That was when I understood what Mom had meant. She wasn't building a machine. She was seeding something. A living network that used everything, soil, stone, metal, bone, to grow. And now it wasn't just under us. It was everywhere. I wanted to run, but where do you go when the ground itself is alive? When every step you take just feeds the thing below you. That's when the lights flickered. Once, twice, then steady. and in the glass of the window behind my reflection, I saw movement, just a shadow shifting along the wall. But it had her shape. Mom. Her reflection moved closer, smiling faintly, eyes glowing green. Then her voice, whispering like a memory caught in static. Adjustment takes time, but soon you'll understand. The power cut out, everything went black, and from beneath the house, the hum returned, stronger than ever, a deep, resonant sound that felt less like a machine now and more like a heartbeat. Or maybe it was both. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I just sat there, waiting for dawn. When the first light came, I looked out the window. The street was empty, but the trees, they'd changed. Their trunks were darker, glistening faintly in the morning sun, and from the roots, green mist rose in thin curls like breath. By the next morning, the whole neighborhood felt wrong. It wasn't something you could see exactly. It was what you didn't see. The birds that usually swarmed the power lines were gone. The usual hum of cars from the highway had vanished. Even the wind had gone still. When I stepped outside, the air felt thick, like breathing through cloth. My shoes sank into the soil a little too easily, and when I lifted my foot, the grass clung to the sole, thin threads stretching before snapping back into the earth. It looked less like roots and more like nerves. Karen hadn't woken up. She just lay there, breathing shallowly, skin pale and damp. The marks on her wrists, tiny, branching green veins, had spread overnight, crawling up toward her elbows. I tried scrubbing them off with soap, then alcohol. Nothing worked. When I pressed my fingers to her pulse, the beat underneath wasn't steady. It pulsed in that same pattern, 73 and 3. I thought about leaving, just packing a bag, taking the car, and driving until the hum faded. But every direction I looked, the trees bent slightly inward, as if pointing me back toward the house. The sign with Wyatt Research had fallen again, but this time the letters glowed faintly in daylight, seeping green through the paint. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being kept here. That afternoon, the social worker came by. Mrs. Briggs. Her knock startled me. It had been so long since I'd heard any sound that wasn't mechanical. She stepped inside, nose wrinkling. "What's that smell?" I didn't answer. Her eyes fell on Karen. "My God, is she sick?" She knelt by her side, checking her forehead. Then she froze. What are these marks?" "They weren't there before," I said quietly. "It's in the ground." Mrs. Briggs turned to me, brows furrowed. "What's in the ground?" "The machine." She stared for a long moment, then stood. "I'll call for help." She stepped into the kitchen, pulling her phone from her bag, but before she could press a button, the lights flickered. Once, twice. And then the house went silent. The hum stopped. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but silence was worse than the sound. Silence meant listening. I took a slow step forward. "Mrs. Briggs?" No answer. Another step. The kitchen smelled faintly metallic, sharp, and wet. The phone lay on the floor, its screen cracked. The air shimmered, faintly green, near the sink. "Mrs. Briggs?" I whispered again. Then I saw her shadow. It wasn't moving right. It stretched across the counter, bending upward like smoke. I turned, and she was standing there, eyes wide, mouth trembling. "You have to," she began. Then she convulsed, gasped, and fell forward. The skin on her neck rippled, something moving beneath it. Her veins pulsed bright green for one long second before her body went still. The hum returned, vibrating through the floorboards deeper than before, resonant enough to shake the windows. From outside came a cracking sound, wood splintering, roots breaking through soil. I ran to the window. The trees were moving. Not swaying, not bending. Walking. Their roots tore from the earth like tendons snapping, slithering across the ground. Each trunk gleamed faintly with that same metallic sheen. The forest wasn't growing anymore. It was reassembling. I grabbed Karen and shook her awake. Her eyes fluttered open, but they weren't her eyes anymore. The irises glowed faintly green, reflecting light that wasn't there. "It's connecting," she whispered. "She's making the lattice." "Who is?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "Mom." She smiled faintly. "She's almost done." I didn't wait. I threw the front door open and ran, dragging her behind me. The air outside hummed like an electric field, each breath sharp enough to sting. The soil pulsed underfoot. Everywhere I looked, the trees leaned inward, their branches intertwining, forming arches over the street. The houses were half buried now, foundations sinking into the ground like soft wax. The asphalt cracked, lines glowing faintly green underneath, as if veins of light were mapping themselves through the town. Karen fell to her knees, clutching her head. "It's in me," she whispered. "I can feel her." I crouched beside her. "You have to fight it, okay? Whatever this is, whatever she did, it's trying to use you." She laughed weakly, voice trembling. "She's not trying to use me. She's trying to finish me." A low rumble echoed from beneath us. The ground shifted, soil breaking apart. Something massive moved below, cables, roots, veins, all twisting toward the center of town. I looked back at the house one last time. The windows were glowing now, steady green light pulsing behind the curtains like a heartbeat, and for a split second I saw her, Mom, standing there in the window, smiling softly, her hands clasped like she was proud. Then the ground gave way. The earth beneath the street cracked open, and we fell. I don't remember the impact, only the sound of my own heartbeat fading into the machine's rhythm. When I opened my eyes, I was underground again. But this wasn't the same cellar. It was bigger, vast. The walls curved upward into a dome of stone and roots. Everything pulsed with faint green light, organic veins running through the dirt, threaded with metal. And in the center of it all stood the lattice, a massive structure, part bone, part steel, rising like a rib cage from the earth. Each beam was covered in that same mossy glow, and through the gaps I saw movement, shapes trapped inside, suspended in translucent green, like bodies caught mid-breath. Karen stood beside it, perfectly still. The veins in her arms glowed brighter now, crawling up her neck. She looked at me, eyes shining. "We're part of it now. Karen, please." Her voice was calm. "It's not death, Justin. It's inheritance." Then she stepped forward into the light, and the lattice opened like a mouth. I screamed her name and ran after her, but the moment my foot hit the ground, the hum surged. A deafening, living sound that rattled the air until I couldn't breathe. The green light flared, blinding me. When it dimmed again, she was gone. Only the hum remained, and beneath it, my mother's voice, soft and endless. "Everything grows back." I don't remember how long I stayed down there. Time had stopped meaning anything. The hum wasn't sound anymore. It was air, pressure, blood. It pulsed through my ribs like I'd been wired into it. When I finally stood, my legs shook. The lattice towered above me, reaching into the blackness overhead. The walls were alive, roots twitching, veins flexing in slow, rhythmic waves. Sometimes I thought I saw faces in them, pressed against the surface like they were trying to push through. Karen's face was one of them. She was still breathing. I saw the rise and fall beneath the membrane. But she wasn't blinking. I touched the wall. It was warm, almost feverish. The hum surged beneath my palm, and for a heartbeat, I wasn't in the tunnel anymore. I was home. The house was whole again, the sun spilling through the windows. Mom was standing at the stove, her back to me. "You see now," she said softly, "it's all connected, above and below." I wanted to run to her, to tell her she was alive, but when she turned around, her face wasn't right. Her eyes were green glass, and her skin had that same faint shimmer as the lattice. "This isn't you," I said. She smiled. "Of course it is. I just kept building." Behind her, the walls began to melt, and I saw what she meant. Beneath the wallpaper were roots. Beneath the floorboards, wires. The whole house was just an outer shell. The real home, the one she'd been creating all along, was underneath. "The surface world dies," she said. "It forgets, it rots, it buries. But the underlayer remembers." Her voice began to distort, doubling in on itself. "Wyatt didn't make the machine. The machine made Wyatt, and now it's making you." I felt something crawl up my wrist then, thin green filaments winding beneath the skin. I tore my hand away, gasping. The vision snapped. I was back in the cavern. The lattice pulsed harder now, glowing bright enough to paint the dirt walls in neon green. The hum rose in pitch, no longer one sound, but thousands of overlapping tones. It sounded like breathing, whispering, praying. The ground shook, and then all at once the walls began to split open. roots unfurled from the cracks, slick and glistening, wrapping around the chamber. They weren't reaching for me, they were reaching through me, threading through the air like they were tasting for heat. When one brushed against my arm, it left a burning mark that sank beneath the skin, tracing the veins. I staggered backward, tripping over a mound of soil. My hand landed on something solid, metal. I brushed it off and froze. It was her locket. Mom's. Inside, 2 photos. One of me and Karen, one of the house. But the background wasn't the real one. It was black, with the same pulsing green veins drawn through it. I realized then that she hadn't died in the collapse. She'd finished what she started. The machine wasn't meant to power anything. It was meant to replace life, to take what rots and make it continuous, mechanical, preserved, eternal. A network of memory and muscle buried under the skin of the world. And now it was waking up. The hum reached a peak, so deep I thought my skull would crack. I ran, blind, desperate, through the tunnel that led upward. The dirt walls shook around me. Somewhere above, the surface groaned. When I burst through the floorboards of what used to be our house, the world outside wasn't the same. The trees had fused into one massive shape, a canopy of dark, webbed branches stretching across the sky. The horizon pulsed faintly green as if the sun had been replaced by something breathing light. The road was gone, only veins of glowing lines where asphalt used to be, and everywhere that hum, low, deep, steady. The air trembled with it. I looked down at my hands. The veins were glowing faintly now, too. It wasn't infection. It was integration. A shadow moved in the doorway behind me. I turned and saw her, Karen. Her hair hung in dark strands, her eyes green as glass. The veins that had covered her arms now laced her face like delicate circuitry. "You made it," she said softly. "Karen," she smiled, a tired, almost loving smile. "You shouldn't have run. She didn't want to hurt us. She just wanted to make sure we'd never disappear." I shook my head. "You're not her. You're not you." She stepped closer. The light inside her pulsed in time with the hum. Maybe not. But what's the difference? Memory is memory. Life keeps moving. You're part of it too, Justin. When she reached out, her hand was warm, steady, and when her fingers brushed my skin, the humming in my chest synced perfectly with hers. For one awful second, it felt right. Then the ground split again. Wide, roaring, and green light poured through the cracks like molten glass. The house tilted, walls bending inward. Karen's face flickered, then split into thousands of smaller lights, each one sinking into the air. I ran. I ran until the forest swallowed me. But the forest wasn't a forest anymore. It was circuitry. Each tree connected by glowing filaments, each root pulsing like an artery. The air hummed. The world had become one living machine, stretching as far as I could see, and in every surface, mud, bark, glass, I could see her reflection. My mother, watching, smiling, whispering. Everything grows back. I don't know how long I've been walking now. There's no day or night anymore, only that steady rhythm beneath my feet. I can't tell where I end and it begins. Sometimes when I press my ear to the ground, I can hear my own voice whispering back from below, repeating the same phrase over and over. Adjustment takes time. If anyone finds this, don't come looking. You can't kill something that isn't separate from you anymore. The machine isn't underground. It's under everything. And lately, when I breathe, I swear I can feel the soil breathing back.